Good morning, YouTube viewers and subscribers. So today I've got a look inside video that's slightly different than most. This is obviously engine has already been disassembled. I did not film the disassembly, and this engine just so happens to be John Kalinsky's OS Max 50 RC engine that he sent me, and I did a quick look at a little while ago, or days ago, or whatever it was. Since that video and today, I've actually tried to run this engine several times and really didn't have much luck. I'm not going to go into the details about what all was going on with it because it's kind of long and drawn out. I spent quite a bit of time with it. Suffice it to say that I talked to John and we both agreed that, hey, what the hell, let's just open this engine up and take a look at it and see if I could see some reason why it wasn't operating properly. And I really wasn't even going to make a video of this, except that when I disassembled this engine, I found some very unique things that I've never seen before on an OS engine. So I thought I would share those with the viewers and subscribers. So this is the engine all disassembled. First thing I want to talk about is this crankcase. This crankcase in and of itself isn't all that special, really. Oops. It's just your standard OS, late or early mid-60s crankcase. But the thing that I thought was interesting is that it actually has a roller bearing inside. I don't know, I think I came in too close and my camera doesn't want to focus, but it has roller bearings. And that was part of the thing that I thought was weird, was every time I tried to run this engine, even though I had loaded it with red Marvel Mystery Oil, a bunch of black gunk would come out from around here. And now I kind of understand why. I guess I don't really understand why it was all black, but it was interesting to find that this thing has roller bearings in it and just a standard regular bearing. So this engine does look very nice on the inside. That's one thing I wanted to show you. The other thing is this piston. Let me zoom in here again, I'm sorry. This piston is a baffle style, but it has a strange little S shape to it, which I thought was weird. And I don't know how well this is gonna. It also, I don't know if that's just the casting. I mean, the glow plug I used in there was never contacting anything, so it's just like it's got a weird casting look to it. And here's the other thing that's weird I just showed you, is that it has dual piston rings. So the dual piston ring thing is going to be quite interesting, because when I go to reassemble this thing, this leads me to the next part. This sleeve, god damn, I'm sorry, I keep zooming in and out. This sleeve has 6 ports here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One small hole here. And then on this side it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 ports. So when I pulled this engine apart, I'm pretty damn sure that these 6 ports were spanning the exhaust area. Now, I can't find a review on this exact engine, but I found one very similar, a Max 40. And in that engine review, it was a later version engine, but it did mention that it had 4 intake ports and 6 exhaust ports, and it looked like it had the same type of setup as this engine. So I'm going to go under the assumption that these ports, the 6 are exhaust, and these 4 are intake. Now, they are at different levels, and so they sit differently in there. The one thing I mentioned to John when I told him I was going to do this was I wasn't really sure that gaskets were going to survive because of the fact that this engine was so old. And John was so gracious enough to actually go out and find a new set of gaskets for this engine. Gracious and lucky, I should say. But as it turns out, the gaskets really didn't get damaged at all. I mean, they're still all intact. This one took a little bit of stuff off of it, but will still seal up fine. The only other odd thing about this engine was the exhaust baffle thing, whatever you want to call it. So this is the side that goes towards the carb, and it actually just slides in here, and then this end cap screws inside here to secure that. Now you're saying, well, there's these 2 holes here, and yes, so you actually have to unscrew this end cap, take the carb off, get that push rod off of here, slide this thing out, so that then you can try and find a really small screwdriver that fits in those holes and try to tighten this thing up. So that is an interesting design. I'm not really sure I understand. It's a very complex design for what seems to be very little benefit. So it seems like OS in their time did some really odd things, and to me this is one of those things. It's just really odd. The only other thing of note really was that when I actually went to disassemble this engine, I think just about every one of these head screws really wasn't even torqued. In fact, I could turn them off with just a bit in my hand, and I thought that was odd too. So I don't know if that means that somebody had actually been inside this engine before, or at least taken the head off and looked at it, and maybe the previous owner did something odd to this piston. I don't know, because if you look here, it just has a really odd looking things going on here, but where it sits in here is that plug really can't contact that baffle at all. So I don't know, it's weird. So I'm gonna just go ahead and put this engine back together, maybe come up with a different glow plug. I tried several glow plugs. I really didn't have success with either of them, but I thought there was enough strange, interesting stuff about this engine that I thought it was worth sharing. So the other thing that's going to be interesting is when I go to reassemble this engine, because of all these ports in this thing, I'm going to have to line up my ring gaps such that they land in these areas where the ports are not present. So it's going to be kind of a challenge to put this thing in there such that these ring gaps aren't hanging up on these ports. So it's going to make it quite interesting to reassemble, and it's just going to be interesting. So anyway, that's a detailed look inside of this OS Max 50 RC engine, and I'll try and get this thing back together and hopefully get it on the stand and get it running here, I don't know, in the next week or two.